The second type of interval recording system we have is called momentary interval recording. Momentary interval recording means we only record at the very end of the interval whether the behavior is happening at that very moment in time. So we might be looking at whether the student is on task doing what they're supposed to do. The time goes by, and at the very end of that interval we'd look, and if they are on task we'd put a plus. If they're off, we'd put a 0. But it's only for that very moment in time. Or we might look to see whether the student is engaged in some other task we've asked them to do. And we look at the very end of the interval. If they are, we put a plus. If they're not, we put a 0. Now, why would we want to look at momentary interval recording? We look at it because it provides us with a couple of big advantages. One is, I only have to look at the student at the very end of the interval. At no other time do I need to look. But the second is, this is really only useful for us when we're talking about really high rate behaviors. This allows us to look at those really high rate behaviors and not get 100% every time, because we're only looking at whether it happened at the end of that interval. So the disadvantage is it will tend to underestimate the behavior, but that works for us if we're looking at really high rate behaviors. Every time we do this, our label is going to be the percentage of intervals in which that behavior occurred.
Okay, folks, today we're going to continue our creative writing assignment that we started yesterday. And remember, this is on something that you guys wanted to write about, so I'm expecting some really great stories. So go ahead and continue. If you have any questions, just raise your hand, let me know. I'll be right here. Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So remember, on momentary, like you just saw, we only record if the student is engaged in the behavior at the very end of the interval. So you saw an interval where the student was out of her seat almost the whole time, but at the very end was sitting in the seat, and the teacher recorded it as in seat. On another one, the student was in seat almost the entire interval, but at the very end got out, and the teacher recorded it as a 0, not in seat. In momentary, we only record what happens at the very end of that interval.